The unmistakable sounds there of the Galician pipes, a sound that will almost certainly greet you as you enter the Plaza de Obradorio, the large square outside the cathedral in Santiago de Compostela. I'm Gary Swift. Hello and welcome to Bite Size Camino, the podcast for information and tips for the older pilgrim on any of the many caminos to Santiago de Compostela. It's claimed that Napoleon once said an army marches on its stomach. Well, I can tell you that pilgrims very much walk the Camino on their feet, unless, of course, they happen to be completing their pilgrimage on horseback or by bicycle. It really does pay to look after your feet, otherwise, your pilgrimage could come to an untimely end. Today's episode is the first of two episodes about footwear and foot care. I believe this subject is quite probably the most important consideration in your planning and preparation. As this is Bite Size Camino, I will be breaking this subject into two consecutive episodes. A disclaimer, I have no medical training other than basic first aid, so any information and advice that I give will be based solely on my own experiences. Let's start with your feet. If you already have foot problems or know that you're prone to them, then there's no doubt that walking a pilgrimage may exacerbate the problem, in which case it would probably be a good idea to seek advice from a chiropodist or podiatrist. As a pilgrim, you will be asking a great deal of your feet. They'll carry you and your pack many miles each day for day after day until you reach the end of your pilgrimage. They will propel you uphill and down dale over every type of terrain you can imagine and through any combination of weather. You need to prepare for this and to care for your feet along the journey. The main foot problem encountered by most pilgrims is blisters. These can range from mildly irritating to totally disabling. Even a small blister in the wrong place can be very painful and will impact upon your enjoyment of the pilgrimage. Blisters are caused by friction on the skin. Your body reacts to this friction by trying to protect that area with a fluid filled blister, which will be exacerbated by heat and moisture. Many pilgrims try to reduce this by coating their feet with a lubricant, such as petroleum jelly or talcum powder. There are also specially crafted products that are used by marathon runners, such as Bodyglide. These products basically form a lubricating layer between your skin and your socks, reducing the friction. Many people employ this technique and swear by it. I've tried this myself, and there's no doubt that the lubrication definitely helps. However, I'm not a great fan because it can leave a sticky residue inside your socks, which can make getting them thoroughly clean each night a more difficult process. And it is important to remove any sticky residue because if small pieces of grit stick to your sock, it will almost certainly result in a blister. My preferred technique is to carry a small roll of surgical tape. If I feel a hot spot developing anywhere on my feet, I stop straight away before any damage is done and cover it with a small piece of tape to form a barrier between my skin and the sock. I prefer the very thin surgical tape, which is almost like paper. It adheres very well and forms an effective barrier and is easily removed without pulling on tender skin. It is important to apply the tape without any wrinkles though. The tape is very light and I carry a small roll in the top pocket of my pack where it's easily accessible. Your next layer of protection is your socks. If you're walking in sandals, you may prefer to walk without socks. Although it's not exactly fashionable, I prefer to wear socks even with sandals to help prevent blisters forming from the friction between my foot and the leather. Any other type of footwear, such as boots or walking shoes, will definitely require socks. There are two schools of thought on socks. Some people wear one pair, some people wear two pairs. For some reason, people pay much less attention to sock selection than they do to their boot or shoe selection. I think this can be a big mistake. The sock is the barrier between your skin and the outer footwear and can play a significant part in the creation of blisters if not selected with care. There are those who swear by wearing two pairs, a thin sock inside a thicker padded sock. The idea being that the thin sock will move with your foot and will slide inside the outer sock, reducing the friction between your foot and the boot and reducing the risk of blisters. The inner sock, whilst not overly tight, needs to be very close fitting to prevent wrinkles forming and will ideally be made from a wicking, fast drying material to help carry blister-inducing moisture away from your skin. There are synthetic material socks available specifically for this purpose, but I'm a big believer in natural materials, and silk is a great material for inner socks. It wicks well, it dries quickly, and its slippery texture helps it to slide and prevent friction. One material to avoid at all costs is cotton. It doesn't wick well, it holds on to the moisture, and can quickly deteriorate into a blister forming mess. In cold, damp weather, I've used the two sock techniques to great effect. If I was walking the Camino in the colder months, I might be tempted down this route. However, I tend to walk my Caminos in the warmer months, and my personal experience has been that the additional layer is too warm in those conditions and can result in excessive sweating and blisters developing. My preference, after much trial and error, is to wear a single layer of socks with mid to heavy padding on the sole and heel. Here again, there are choices of material. Some of my friends will only wear the range of synthetic walking socks that are available. My preference is for merino wool. It's good at wicking, provides good friction-free padding, and also has natural antibacterial properties that help to keep them smelling fresh even after a hard day's walking, which I'm sure some of your companions in the albergues or your hotel may appreciate. As with the inner socks, it's essential to ensure a good fit to help prevent wrinkling or balling inside your footwear. When you stop for a break, it's a good idea to remove your footwear and air your feet and your socks. If you carry an extra pair of socks, you can switch to the dry pair, and in good weather, pin the first pair to your pike to air fully as you walk. Keeping your feet free from damp sweat can go a long way towards preventing blisters. Many pilgrims will only carry one or two pairs of socks. My own preference is for 4 pairs. This might appear excessive to some, but they are lightweight, they don't take up much room, and I think they're one of the most important parts of your kit. I use 3 pairs for walking, which are alternated to ensure I'm always wearing dry socks, and I reserve a pair for the evenings. I try to wash and dry the walking socks every night if possible. The extra pair can be worth their weight in gold if you encounter several consecutive days of rain. There is a third type of sock which I've used in winter in the UK, but never had the occasion to use on my Caminos. These are waterproof socks, such as sealskins. These socks have a breathable Gore-Tex layer and are very effective at keeping water out and the cold out and your feet dry. I usually wear these with an inner sock for comfort. They can be very effective, especially if you're walking in non-waterproof shoes or boots and happen to be caught out in several days of cold, wet weather. They do work, but as I tend to walk my Caminos in the warmer months, they would be far too warm for me. If I ever walk a winter Camino, I would certainly consider carrying a pair. If you are in the unfortunate position where you have developed blisters, it's important to deal with the problem as soon as possible. If the blister is only small and not too painful, then a simple covering of surgical tape may be sufficient to protect it whilst it heals. For larger, more painful blisters, there are special blister plasters available. One of the more common and well-known brands is Compeed. Again, I've used these to great effect. On one occasion, my walking boots cracked inside, resulting in large blisters forming on the ball of my foot. I had no option other than to walk for several days before I could replace my shoes. Luckily, I had a pack of Compeed in my first aid kit. They work really well if used correctly. My advice is to apply a plaster that is larger than the blister to protect not only the blister but the surrounding skin. Also, don't try to remove the plaster. It will be stuck very firmly to the blister, and if pulled off, will probably tear the top off the blister, leaving an open wound that will be very sore and could be susceptible to infection. The Compeed is waterproof, so showering or bathing won't make the plaster come off. It will fall off naturally after a few days, by which time the blister should be healed. Should you need more medical advice or assistance, the Camino is very well served in this respect. The towns and almost every village will have a farmacia, whose staff really are experts in the treatment of minor injuries. These should be your first port of call if required. There will also be doctors or hospitals along the way, should you need them. For the Brits, remember to carry your GHIC card, which covers you for medical treatment in the EU. Details are available on the .gov website. I cannot advise you to do this, but along with many other walkers, I carry a few extra items in my first aid kit. Antiseptic wipes or gel, a sharp sewing needle, and a small amount of sewing thread and a bottle of betadine, an iodine solution. If I have a very full blister which is too painful to walk on, then I deal with this by cleaning the needle and the affected area with the antiseptic wipe or gel. I thread the needle with a couple of inches of the thread and pass the needle and thread through the base of the blister as close as possible to where it meets the skin. I take the needle and thread all the way through the blister, leaving about an inch of thread sticking out each side. The thread will assist the wicking of the fluid from inside the blister as you walk. I then clean the area again thoroughly and apply the betadine to sterilize the area. Once the betadine has air dried, I cover the blister with a plaster. The plaster and thread are removed later once the swelling has gone down. I've used this method successfully and it's allowed me to continue walking when I would otherwise have had to rest up for a few days. As I stated earlier, I've no medical training and cannot recommend that you do this yourself. I've included it in the spirit of openness and what has worked for me. If in doubt, always seek medical advice or attention. The pharmacias really are excellent. Next time, I'll be discussing sandals, shoes, and boots. I'm Gary Swift, and if you've enjoyed this episode of the Bite Size Camino, please give me a rating or review. It really does help.